Hi, Craig.
Hey, Craig.
Hey, Craig.
Craig. Hi, Craig.
Hi, Craig.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Paddocks. It's almost time for the Montreal Grand Prix in Canada this weekend, and today we're going to give you our predictions. On the episode, we have Melissa, Amy, Ito, Meg, LeAnne, and myself, Chelsea, and we're going to start off with a little history on the track, and I'm going to pass it on to Ito.
Yeah, well, the Canada GP, or Grand Prix du Canada, because it's in Montreal after all, has been going on since 1961 in various locations all over Canada. In the early years, mostly alternating between Mo Sport Park in Bowmansville, Ontario, and the Circuit Mont-Tremblant in Quebec between 67 and 71, when it officially became part of the F1 calendar. After a bunch of safety concerns at Mont-Tremblant, and then at Mo Sport, it would find its current home at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve on Notre Dame Island in Montreal in 78. Although that track wasn't actually called Gilles Villeneuve, but rather Ile Notre Dame, after its location. But since the Canadian Gilles Villeneuve was that one driver that won the first race held at the circuit in 78, in addition to him being one of the great Canadian drivers, and the sad fact that he died racing at the Belgian GP in 1982, it was dedicated to him the next year. And even if you look at the start and finish line, they now have an inscription saying Salut Gilles, which means hi Gilles, which is insanely cute, in my opinion. The track itself is 4.361 kilometers, or for our American viewers, 2.71 miles, and the mandatory race distance is reached after 70 laps. It has a few famous features, such as because the barriers are running so close to the circuit, very much like a track we covered earlier in the season, Monaco, it's famous for its crashes. And that one barrier especially, which is at the exit of the final chicane before the start and finish straight. And it's especially funny with that barrier because it has a sign on it that says, "Welcome to Quebec," in French. And that's why as soon as that track was basically built, it was named Mur de Québec, which means Wall of Quebec. But in 99, it was actually renamed the Wall of Champions because in that race, 3 WDC winners, Damon Hill, Michael Schumacher, and Jacques Villeneuve, who coincidentally is the son of Gilles, as well as Ricardo Zonta, who's a GT champion, crashed into that wall during the race. Which, come on, is kind of ironic because it literally says, "Hello, Quebec," like, "Welcome to Quebec." Like, that's why it was named the Wall of Champions. And I feel like that renaming also became kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy because in 2011, during free practice, Sebastian Vettel actually also crashed into that wall after he won his first world championship in 2010. Other famous features of the track include the Senna S, named after Ayrton Senna, the Pont de la Concorde, which is a so-called quick ink to slow cars down, the hairpin at turn 10, which is notorious for overtake, but also many mistakes, because it takes immense driver skill and a good car in order to maneuver it successfully without like crashing or whatever. And then lastly, in the current layout, which has been in use since 2002, the fastest lap record is still being held by Valtteri Bottas, who set that in 2019 with Mercedes, which, knowing Max and everyone else on the grid, that's pretty impressive. That has not been beaten. And in terms of winning streaks and stuff like that, Michael Schumacher and Lewis Hamilton both are tied for 7 wins at the track, and Ferrari hold the most constructors' wins with 14. And before we go into predictions, Let's look at 2022.
So last year, quali was very interesting. For those who don't remember, we had a very rainy quali session. There were also drivers who were, by the FIA, dubbed driving unnecessarily slow. Our Q1 results, we had Max in P1, Fernando Alonso in P2, and Carlos Sainz in P3. There were some issues for Aston Martin in Q1, and Alexander Albon and Checo both crashed out in Q1. For those who haven't seen the Q1 before or haven't seen the highlights, there's this fantastic little clip of Checo quite literally walking through this wooded area by the track that just for me always gives me a good little giggle, because it's just like the most obscure way to get back to your garage from where he crashed out on track. Q2, we had a slightly similar top three of Max Verstappen, P1, Fernando Alonso, P2, and George Russell in P3. For Q3, we had a first-time appearance of Mick Schumacher, making it to Q3 and finishing P6, with our final top three being Max in P1, Fernando in P2, and Carlos in P3, with both Yuki and Charles taking new power units and starting from the back of the grid.
So yeah, as Amy had mentioned, Charles and Yuki having their penalties, starting back at the grid. And then per usual at the start of the race, Max started off with a stronger start compared to Fernando and kept the lead into the first turn. Unfortunately, around the third turn, we did see a small incident between Lewis and Kevin, where Lewis left with his car being undamaged, but unfortunately for K-Mag, his front wing end plate was hanging on for dear life. So due to the damages, after that incident between the two drivers, there were other drivers on the track that were complaining about the front wing hanging on in such a way, and thus K-Mag had a black and orange flag. For those who don't know, and I actually didn't know, so I did look up what a black and flag meant. It means, or it's usually used to inform the driver that their car has a mechanical problem and is a possible danger for not only themselves, but to other drivers. Around lap 8, Checo pulled off the circuit at turn 8 due to a gearbox failure, causing for a virtual safety car. Later on at the race, around lap 19, we saw Mick retire his car and run off at turn 8 again due to an engine failure, bringing a second virtual safety car of the race. And sadly, at lap 48, Yuki crashed at turn 2 after locking up at pit exit, thus causing for an actual safety car during the race.
And while we did end the race with Mick, Yuki, and Checo with DNFs, we did end with Max in P1, Carlos in P2, and Lewis in P3, which we all loved to see. Well, we all could definitely talk about last year's race for a long time. We'd much rather get on to our predictions, so let's pass it over to Ito for some predictions for this year.
I mean, honestly, at this point, I don't even know what to say anymore, because I can't make it sound unique or unexpected anymore. It feels like, because at the end of the day, the likelihood of something that I say that sounds unexpected or unique, rather, coming true is like 0.0001%. At the same time, a girl can still dream. And after all, Ferrari won at Le Mans this past weekend. And maybe, just maybe, that is the exact fire that the F1 Ferrari team needed to be lit under their butts in order to pull off the impossible. At the same time, whenever I predict a good outcome for Ferrari, they don't deliver. So maybe I hex them with my predictions, who knows? But if we're going with that theory, because at this point I'll try anything once, I'm going for an RB12 with George in P3. Let's see whether that kind of reverse psychology works this weekend. I'll be sure to report back in Monday's episode. And for those asking why I didn't put Lewis in P3, because I prefer Lewis over George. Sorry, George.
And as a Lance girly, I would absolutely lose it to see him have a podium at his home race. I'm just not sure that's actually going to happen. As Ito said, I really hope that Le Mans lit a fire under Ferrari's butts and they can prove everybody wrong, including myself. But my expectations are just really low for them right now. I would love to see an Aston Martin 1-2 because I think it would just be absolutely iconic for Lance to win his home race, and technically kind of an unofficial home race for Aston Martin because Lawrence is Canadian. And I would love to see Lance have one of his besties and get Esty Bestie in P3. I just think that would be fantastic. For the rest of the grid, I would just love to see maybe the return of Valtteri Bottas to the points, especially since he has gotten points at Canada in the past. I am intrigued to see if we have any new victims to the Wall of Champions this year. Who knows? It does look like we might be getting another wet quali when I looked at the forecast, so I'm excited to see if people are gonna have some issues trying to hook up a good lap, and we'll see what happens. I'm personally holding out hope for a potential Nicholas Latifi sighting, seeing as it is Canada, but the man has been MIA since he left, so I'm not gonna hold my breath on that one.
Now that you mentioned Latifi, I actually did see a picture float around on social media of him saying that he's alive and well, and he looks so much happier and that he's thriving. So I was very happy to see that. Just a little side note to add on to Amy's. But as for my predictions this round, I'll have to face the truth and say that Max will most likely win. As Amy also had mentioned, there's talk of rain this weekend, so I am hoping that the rain makes for an exciting race, preferably one that will keep me on my toes. Just want something different, maybe a safety car. I don't want anything bad to happen, but just something to make it fun and interesting to talk about in our recap episode. For the last two spots in the podium, again, realistically, it might be Checo. Who knows with how he's been performing the last few races recently. However, with how Mercedes performed last week and how well Aston Martin has been doing, I wouldn't be surprised to see Alonso, Lewis, or George, or even all three on the podium. For a fun plot twist, however, it would be fun to see another surprise podium similar to when Esty Bestie was in P3. So I'm going to say, let's see Lance up there. Doesn't matter which place, just see him up there. It'd be nice to see a little switch up from the usual three that we've been seeing this season thus far. But again, in my delusional world, it'll always be Ferrari on top. But again, I'd rather just be realistic at this point so I don't hurt my own feelings this weekend.
Based on how the last couple of races have gone, it would only be right and realistic if I have Max coming in at P1 for my predictions. I say it all the time. There's something about him, especially with that car this season, that you just can't stop. Unless maybe someone like a Fernando Alonso can bring it to him this weekend, which is what I'm hoping for. Because he has been saying that Barcelona was the first and the last time this season that he or Aston Martin will not be on the podium. So can he possibly dethrone Max for the first time? Well, not the first time this season since Checo has done that, but for ending his streak, I'm hoping for it. I'd love to see Fernando in that P1 spot, but realistically, I have him... I see him finishing on a podium, but if it's a weekend like last weekend, who knows? I'm very hopeful that the upgrades will help them. And I honestly think Max will most likely have another Grand Slam this weekend with being the top of practice sessions and qualifying. I hope not, but I don't think anything can stop that man as of right now. For the rest of my predictions, I'm going to put Lewis in P2 and Carlos in P3. Lewis statistically has always done well at this track, and he loves this track. And he always seems to end up on the podium somehow in some way on Montreal. So I'd really like to see him up on the podium. I think it would also give Mercedes that morale team boost that they've been looking for, especially with how their season has gone so far and last season. And I just think Lewis deserves it. I'm ready to see him fight at some point for that 8th title and to bring it to Max to kind of shut him down a little bit. And I think Carlos right now is looking to be stronger than Charles after last weekend's performance. Carlos did finish on the podium last year in Canada, so maybe he'll do it again. And like I said, he's looking to be the stronger of the two Ferraris at the moment. But that could change once Charles gets more used to the update, since Carlos ran more of an updated car in Barcelona than Charles, even though they did start to update Charles's car throughout the weekend. But you never know, especially since, like the other girls have said, they're expecting a wet weekend and a wet race, and that can totally change things up and cause a complete and utter chaos. And it can even yield a completely different and unrealistic podium than what we're all predicting, which honestly, kind of hoping for that. I think that would be fun. And outside of the top three, I'm really hoping to see both McLarens finish in the points, because those are my boys. And they need that team morale boost like Mercedes has been having. And Lando just deserves to be in the points. He deserves to honestly be with a better team, but that's a whole nother discussion. And I'm also hoping to see Alex Albon in the points, because that man has been driving the crap out of that Williams. And I love Alex. Plus, he's the only driver that I've seen wearing the bracelet I made him. So I also have a little love for him right now, but hoping for a great weekend. In other sad news, more than 400 wildfires have been spreading across the regions of Quebec, Nova Scotia, and Ontario in Canada. And over 10 million acres of land has been destroyed, and over 20,000 Canadians have been displaced from their homes. This is predicted to be the worst ever wildfire season Canada has ever seen, since conditions aren't supposed to get any better for them, and it's supposed to remain warm and dry until at least late September. All firefighter resources in Canada are overwhelmed, and all are being used. So countries like the US, Australia, and New Zealand and South Africa have sent and are continuing to send around 950 firefighters to help combat these fires. There are different routes people can choose to help the people of Canada, the wild animals, and also the land. People can donate to the Canadian Red Cross. They can donate masks, since the air quality is terrible. And I've read things that say if you go outside, it's like smoking 6 packs a day of cigarettes. So masks are really helpful for these people so they can actually breathe if they have to go outside. Contribute to the Firefighters Without Borders, which is a nonprofit organization in Ontario that donates equipment and training to volunteers to help fight these fires. You can donate to the Ottawa Native Friendship Center, which is another nonprofit, but it helps serve the Indigenous community in the Ottawa Carleton region. Please consider donating or helping in any way you can, because even myself and some of the other girls who live on the East Coast have experienced the effects of these wildfires all the way down in the United States on the East Coast. So if it was that bad here, I can't even imagine what it's like there. I just feel for these people and these animals, and I hope we can help them out in any way we can, since Canada is also a very slaying place, and I love Canada. Please check out the links for donations on our socials. The links are going to be posted on our stories and also in the description of this episode. Just help out in any way you can. In other news, it was announced Wednesday morning that Seb will be returning to his RB7 to drive around the Nürburgring, and our other pal, Danny Rick, will also be joining him, but in the Red Bull 8. I'm super excited to see both of them back on the track and also in their old cars as well, that they both have performed extremely well in. And the boys just seem to be happy with Red Bull. Like, I saw a picture on Twitter today of Seb while he wasn't at Red Bull, and then when he was back at Red Bull, and then Danny before Red Bull, and when he was back at Red Bull, and they both just look so happy after talking about it. I don't know what Red Bull does for their drivers, but clearly it's something amazing, because their drivers are happy and they're not upset and depressed like how Danny was last season, or for really the last 2 seasons at McLaren. And also, I love Funko Pops, and I saw that Funko Pop are releasing pops of Max and Checo this summer. So Lewis and Valtteri will no longer be the only drivers who have made their claim to the Funko Pop status. So I'm very excited for that, and I definitely will be purchasing them, because I have a whole collection.
So as Meg was bringing up the Funko Pop, I pulled out my boyfriend's Lewis Hamilton Funko Pop. He was very hard to find. I found him on GameStop. Fun fact, if anyone's looking for him, they have Valtteri as well too. But I just want to say I hope other teams hop on this trend, because I would love some other drivers on the grid into my collection. I can't personally say I'm going to add Max or Checo, maybe Checo, because he's Latino as I am. But it would just be cool to see other teams join in on this, so fans can have like cool memorabilia, cool things to add to their F1 collections and all. So I think I'm very excited to see how they turn out anyways. So because I love my Lewis one and I look at him every day as I'm working.
I would look at him every day too.
I mean, who wouldn't? Check out his stories.
So, as the resident Red Bull girl of the PGP gang, I am beyond excited to see Danny and Seb back in RB7 and the RB8. Oh, little fun fact for people who may not know this. Sebastian Vettel is one of my favorite people on the planet because this man has named his cars. A fun fact for those who don't know, the RB7 is affectionately known as Kinky Kylie. The RB8 was either Luscious Liz or Randy Mandy, because Sebastian Vettel is a menace. So that's my little Red Bull fun fact. There is a full list on the internet for those who want to see the whole list. It is absolutely fantastic and always gives me a good giggle. But I don't know about anybody else, but I am so sad that we have not received a home race helmet from Lance Stroll. I was really looking forward to something just so epically Canadian from him. And who knows, he could surprise us. Maybe he just hasn't posted anything of it. And we're gonna show up on Thursday and all of a sudden there's gonna be pictures of this brand new lid, and I could be so wrong. But I was expecting to be smacked in the face with Canadian pride from him, and there is nothing. And I'm just a little heartbroken over it.
I mean, honestly, I'm kind of not surprised because Aston Martin is not really known for the like special edition stuff. So getting a special helmet or even getting merch or whatever, it was kind of to be expected because even though he released special merch stuff, it was mid, I would say. It wasn't that special, honestly. Compared to what Ferrari released, for example, for Monaco and Spain, or what Mercedes is likely going to release for Silverstone with their 2 British drivers. It's to be expected, honestly, at this point.
Who knows? Maybe we'll see a giant maple leaf on a helmet or on a race suit or somewhere in general. We would love to see it. Very Canadian, very Lance Strollish, if you will. In other news, I was keeping up on different socials of what the drivers were up to the past few days, and I personally enjoyed seeing Lando and Lewis take on New York City. Typical Lewis posting up his little selfie videos running, and then Lando being the tourist of one of the greatest cities in the nation and going to see the Empire State Building, going into that, as Ito had explained to the PGP girls one day this past week, the VIP floor level where only very few select people can go. And then I couldn't remember for the life of me a little while ago who else was in New York City, but it also turns out that our favorite Danny Rick was also there. But I was hearing that from a few other podcasts that I listened to that some fans were bombarding him as he was eating dinner or lunch outside, and it was to the point where him and his girlfriend Heidi had to like pick out food from their teeth to smile and pose. So I just want to put it out there as a fangirl, a fan of F1. Don't get me wrong, if I were to see any driver, I probably would freak out too. But remember, they're humans too at the end of the day, and they want to enjoy their downtime, especially maybe some intimate time with their families, their friends, significant others, whoever it may be. And they have every right to enjoy said downtime. And knowing Danny, the person that he is and everything, he's probably not the type person to be like, no, I'm not going to take pictures, and he's going to take pictures. So again, if you see them and they're, doing something that you wouldn't want to be disturbed doing, like eating, give them the space and, just say hi maybe from afar, and then he'll probably say hi back to you. And personally, I'd rather have an intimate moment like that instead of knowing that I interrupted my favorite driver during their downtime like that. But my favorite photo op moment of this past week was seeing Lewis and Tom Holland leave the same restaurant. I love Tom Holland. I love Spider-Man. So this was like a little like giddy moment. But for those who don't know, Tom is also an F1 fan and a big Lewis Hamilton fan. So in any interviews or anything like that, they'll ask him who his favorite driver is, and he'll be like, it's Lewis. And then he'll find any way to speak about an experience about him. So I just know he's never going to let like live this down and will find any way possible to bring it up and be like, yeah, I hung out with Lewis and he's a great guy and whatever. So just can't wait for that.
On the note of Tom Holland, actually, remember how he was at the Monaco GP? He was there, invited by Red Bull to waving the checkered flag at the end, which, if you haven't seen the videos of him hitting himself in the face with the flag, go watch that. But the funny part is he was on the grid walk, and when he was on the grid pre-race, he was asked who his favorite driver was. And even though he was invited by Red Bull, he of course had to say Lewis Hamilton. And that to me is just funny because I'm like, dude, he's not a Red Bull driver. They paid for your ticket. I love that you're fanboy, but just remember who you got the tickets through.
Two things on that. One, there was a lot of people invited to the Red Bull garage that are Lewis fans. One of the other ones being Neymar Jr. because he, again, went to Spain a week or two later and spent some time in the Mercedes garage. And it seems that they are pretty close. And two, I need Tom Cook to take notes from Tom Holland on how to wave a checker flag because I would do the same thing as Tom did and hit myself in the face with it. And personally, we just need someone that's excited and hyped to be up there waving the flag because not anyone can just do it. So, Cook, take some notes, please.
Or you can look at Adam Driver waving the checkered flag, or actually I think it might have been the starting flag, but that man was just elated. But to touch base on Tom Holland being in the Red Bull garage, I actually think he was invited by Tag Heuer, one of the Red Bull sponsors. I think they invited a pretty big group of influencers to the event, but I'm pretty sure it was Tag Heuer and not technically Red Bull.
Back to Lewis. I can't remember if it was TikTok or Twitter, but I saw a video of, I believe it was him and Toto were speaking at some event, and there were like PETA protesters there, and they got up in the middle of the whole like interview and started saying things about Roscoe, and they were like, Lewis, you care so much about all these things, why can't you help us, blah blah blah. And my favorite part of the whole video is Toto is trying not to lose his shit and laugh because he's just sitting there trying to hold in a laugh, and he keeps going back and forth between Lewis and the protester, and in his mind you can totally just see him going, what the fuck is going on here?
Oh, it was actually a Forbes business event. It might have been a Forbes Finance, but it was a Forbes sponsored event that PETA protesters showed up at. The whole wrong situation. Yeah, it was a little chaotic, y'all.
From what I saw with that whole PETA protesting, I have my own feelings about them. I love what they stand for and everything, but a lot of the ways that they go about things is just like, But it was just something that like Lewis has like no control over, and it's kind of saw comments in those videos, and like people were like, bring it up to like the FIA, bring it up to actual F1 people that make these decisions. Yes, Lewis can advocate and say something, but at the end of the day, there's only so much power that this man holds, and you can tell Lewis was just like, okay, like I can't really do much. And you know, PETA's always known to do like their little protests and everything at the like wrong place, wrong time, but sometimes it's just like, okay, it's a little too wrong at this place and everything. It's just kind of
And with those predictions wrapped up, we're going to go into our pre-outro. We're going to do Moment of the Weekend this week. And you know what? He's made his presence known, and it's Gary the Groundhog. He was the moment last year. He's going to be the moment this year. Ito let me know that F1 has already posted a TikTok seeing him. So he's already going, man. He's ready. He's here to mess shit up, man. So can't wait to see Gary today and Saturday and Sunday. But be safe out there, Gary. Don't cause a pedo issue, Gary. Thank you so much. The ladies have had some amazing predictions this weekend. What are your predictions? Let us know on our socials. Everywhere is at Paddock Girls Podcast, unless you want to chat on Twitter. Then you can find us at Paddock Girls Pod. Be on the lookout tomorrow, Saturday, on our socials for my new social segment, as all the girls know and our avid listeners, I don't like to give out my predictions because I am very, very superstitious, especially when it comes to sports. So every Saturday of race weekend, I will be posting a video letting a TikTok filter predict the race weekend for me. I personally think it's going to be super fun. Thank you all for joining us in the paddock. See you after this currently very rainy race weekend. Bye, Craig.
Bye, Craig.
Au revoir, Craig.
Bye, Craig.
Hi, Craig.
Hi, Craig.